All right, we got a lot to talk about today. So let's bring on our guest. It's trial attorney Alexis Rosenberg. Alexis, is always a pleasure whenever I get to talk to you. So thank you so much for coming on. And today's topic is kind of crazy. Let's just say we're talking about freak offs. What do you make of the freak off allegations, just generally?
Well, first of all, never in my career did I think that I would start a Monday morning talking about freak offs. So, just to start with that. So, I mean, obviously, this is crazy. We're having a whole trial about freak offs, and more or less, not to make light of it, there are horrific allegations having to do with this. I mean, we're talking about sex trafficking, you know, carrying people across state lines, conspiracy, bribery, arson, and kidnapping. I mean, this is just, very outrageous and horrible, horrible allegations.
And to me, I feel like this is huge for the prosecution. It's all going to come back to freak offs because they're kind of the underlying thing in all of this. Yes, we've got the racketeering and everything, but it all kind of, as you said, regarding to the sex trafficking and everything, goes back to the freak offs. So, how important is it for prosecutors to paint the picture or the visuals of these freak offs for the jurors?
Well, it's going to be very important, but I also think that this topic is something that they're going to pay a lot of attention to, opposed to some boring real estate deal or something of that nature if you're sitting on a jury. But I mean, they have to prove because the underlying is racketeering. So they do have to prove that we had an enterprise. They have to prove that there was at least two acts within 10 years, which it doesn't sound based on the complaint. They're going to have an issue with that. And they're going, so how many of these freak offs now it's been, escalated to, we've got the allegation having to do with commercial prostitution. So the amount of it to get to that level, the incidents, meaning how many freak offs, who was involved, all of that is going to be important to prove that racketeering, which is what he was charged with.
I agree. I think that the freak offs are really central to the prosecution, the government's case, and how they're going to build it. We're going to talk a lot about it. And I guess I wanted to talk about everything we know so far with the freak offs, because I'm sure when it comes time to trial, we'll learn even more. But just based on some of the complaints, the indictment that we have read so far, we know a couple of things. And I guess I'll start with the basics. Number one, the allegations that Diddy or some of his associates would drug these women, men, victims or survivors in all of this, the drugging part of it. And I know we've heard rumblings that potentially Diddy's defense could be, oh, this was consensual, like maybe it was weird. A freak off's kind of crazy, but everyone wanted to do it. It was consensual. However, if drugging gets in the mix, if someone's drugged against their will, that doesn't make it consensual anymore. What do you think about the drugging aspect?
Well, this goes back to the allegations that were had to do with Bill Cosby that we have where he was drugging and then somebody, it doesn't make it consensual. If you've drugged somebody, then how do they consent to what's going on? He has to put up a defense, and he's hired very good attorneys. He recently added Brian Steele, who was Young Thug's attorney, to the mix. And so you have to put up a defense. Really, when looking at this without seeing other than the complaint and what we've heard in the media, what is the defense? The real defense only is that it was consensual, but we still have the allegations related to bringing prostitutes across state lines, whether that was consensual or not, as well as we have all the other allegations. So he's going to come at that and then with the consensual, but how many times, how many victims are we going to have saying, no, I was drugged, this is what happened? And then we have the fact the IV bags being brought in. I mean, it just isn't, from what we know so far, leaning towards that.
You brought up something really important in all of this, the transportation to engage in prostitution, because one of the allegations of this freak off situation is that Diddy or his associates would force these people to have sex with prostitutes. And that goes back to the indictment talking about bringing these people across state lines. And I think it even mentions potentially internationally at times that these sex workers were transported from place to place. And so I do wonder about some of these sex workers. I know that we're going to have some pretty strong testimony. I'm just going to assume pretty strong testimony on the government side of things. Do you think we could hear from any of these potential sex workers?
I think that we are. I mean, here's the bottom line. Because it's racketeering, they can potentially, remember, bring in, if in the complaint it says unknown possible defendants. So they could bring those people in to testify. They could potentially be threatened with having charges against them. They could work plea deals that have been confidential. There's different things that are taking place behind the scene. But I think at trial, we are definitely going to hear from some of these sex workers that were present, what happened, the exchange of money, the drug situation, that are going to come testify about that for sure.
Something you mentioned too in one of your recent answers that I wanted to go back to, you brought up the IVs, which is something we read about in the indictment. And to me, it just really paints a picture of this, that these IVs then were given to Diddy allegedly, or the people involved to help them recuperate because these were such physically exhausting scenarios, these alleged freak offs. So we have things like that. We have the 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube that were collected during these federal raids. We've got the IVs. Apparently, there was lighting to help set up all of this. And I guess I want to talk about the recordings in a minute. But I guess just generally the evidence in all of this. Do you think that is going to help bolster the prosecution's argument?
Well, definitely. I mean, also they found drugs when they raided the house. They found
Mhm.
drugs. I believe they also found drugs when they arrested him in New York in the hotel room. So the drugs were in the house, like you said. And then the real is, I mean, right away, everybody was kind of like taken back by the 1,000 bottles of baby oil. Who needs that? Even though his attorney made the comment that he likes to shop at Costco, but who needs 1,000 bottles of baby oil, and what was the purpose of that? And that, I think it's all linked together, that we have these different stories that I'm sure the prosecution has, interviewed different witnesses, and the stories are all probably coming together. The federal government generally does not come in and make arrests until they have done a very thorough investigation. Usually it lasts a minimum of 18 months. So I do, they're going to already have statements and testimony and interviews from different witnesses, and it probably all mixes together that they came in, they were given drugs either offered, or they didn't realize, that they had taken it when they refused it, and then they woke up and they were out of it, and they were being offered IVs, whatever that may have been. I know that the one sex worker who has come out in the public has kind of collaborated that, saying that he was brought in to have sex with some of Diddy's girlfriends and other people, that he was transported across state lines, which is key. The transportation across state lines for this case is key, as well as the baby oil, that there was baby oil, it was heated up, their phones were taken away. So it's going to be for that jury, that witness after witness that's kind of saying exactly the same thing, having the same experience.
Yeah, the fact that if we hear this testimony one after another or see the videos, which I'll talk about in a second, and they all say very similar things, I do feel like that does a good job of corroboration. Like, this happened to me in whatever year, this happened to this other person in whatever, it shows kind of the pattern into all of it. I do want to talk about the video evidence, though, what we believe to be. I mean, there's a lot of electronic recordings that were recovered by the federal government in all of this. So, I mean, we could see photos, audio, video likely in all of this, which is, I mean, the ultimate irony in that the allegations are that Diddy recorded these things to kind of use as revenge porn to keep these victims silent is now allegedly being used against him.
Mhm.
What do you make about the recordings and all the freak off stuff? I feel like that's, great for the prosecution to have to show the video evidence.
So we haven't seen the videos, obviously, but I mean, juries love videos. They love to see a video of whatever the crime may be. So the video is going to be very important. I mean, it could show that the person consented, hypothetically, or it could show that we have very intoxicated or drugged individuals that were totally out of it and not capable of making consent, consenting to the situation. That will have to come out at trial, obviously. But also the videoing of somebody without their knowledge. Do they even have knowledge, or that this video of them was being taken? And then the threat, like you said, that there, the revenge porn threat. Although I think it raises beyond revenge porn. I mean, I think it was really being used to keep people in line, to get them not to say things against him, to threaten that they were going to destroy their career, not just simply revenge, but more for that extortion and keeping them in line.
I agree with you. I think we're going to hear a lot from the prosecution and maybe how the testimony goes about potential witness tampering, the threats of violence. And that's something we've seen throughout the indictment, too, is these alleged guns that these people sometimes would have of the Combs enterprise to silence these people. So I mean, we have the video, which is going to be, if it's shown, very difficult to watch. And I assume some things will be, especially according to the allegations. We'll have people who are drugged, people who are allegedly, sexually assaulted. I mean, really tough stuff. But then to have the victim testimony too. And I know we've talked about testimony a little bit, but to me, that's really going to be what the jury would hang their hat on, the fact that they're hearing somebody recount all of this. How vital do you think the testimony is in all of this from these survivors?
Well, you definitely need to have that testimony, because we've got to prove the acts, although it only needs to be 2 in 10 years. So you don't have to have a litany, but to hear what somebody suffered and went through and their experience, is the jury is going to want to hear that. But also, you got to remember, the prosecution does have a situation where, although in this case maybe not so much, but a lot of times juries kind of want to lean towards the famous people. They kind of make excuses for the famous people. Now, I'm not so sure in this case, because I think these allegations are just so egregious that the public opinion that we're hearing is not where. I haven't heard much of defense coming out, on social media or anything of Diddy. But generally, that is a hurdle that a prosecutor does have to overcome if you have a celebrity or a famous person. So making the victims real by putting them on the stand, and where you can actually palpably feel the emotion of what they went through, is very important for a jury to experience, and it helps the prosecution get that conviction.
I know we talked about testimony, and this is kind of away from the freak offs a little bit, but I just am so curious because we know that there are going to be a couple of victims, including Cassie Ventura, but also on the defense side of things, it's up to Diddy whether he wants to testify. Now, for me as Sierra Gillespie, I want him on the stand because I want to hear about what he has to say. I don't know if that's really the best choice. Obviously, it's up to P. Diddy himself whether he wants to testify, and he'll talk about it with his attorneys. But what do you think we're going to see? Do you think it's something that's been a bit of a discussion?
I mean, listen, we all would love for Diddy to get on the stand and give us some mansplaining about this freak off. However, usually it's a rare circumstance where a defense attorney is going to advise their client, the defendant, to get up and testify. Now, that being said, ultimately that is the defendant, in this case is Diddy's, determination, and not the attorney. Attorneys give advice all the time, and our clients don't necessarily follow it. I do not think it would be a good idea for him to get on the stand. It would just open up way too much. So I don't think he's going to get on the stand, but you never know, because he's got it appears a pretty big ego. So he may want to get on the stand, and then his attorneys, would have to let him on the stand.
It'll be interesting to see. I think you're right that we probably wouldn't see P. Diddy on the stand. That's just kind of me being hopeful, wanting to hear his side of things. I guess we'll wait and see. Anything is possible, really. And I guess that kind of leads into my last question here is, Do you think we're going to learn more specifics? I know that we've talked about the indictment, the superseding indictments, where we've learned a bit about these freak offs, and we've also learned some from other civil allegations. But do you think as this goes to trial, we're going to learn even more specifics about what happened, storylines that go along with it? And I mean, I say storyline, but these, according to the people, are factual, what happened to them, their personal stories. So do you think we're going to have a more vivid picture based on all the future testimony and the case in chief that the prosecution brings?
Definitely. I mean, there's going to be a trial. It's supposed to take about 3 weeks. It could take longer, could take months. With motion practice and all of that, I mean, right now they've said a week for jury selection. It's supposed to start opening next week, but that, of course, could be extended. As that evolves, we are going to get more information because there is a lot of stuff that the federal government hasn't released or hasn't come out, because they don't want that to come out. Because part of the investigation is who else was involved in this. He wasn't doing this for as long. I mean, the indictment is going back to '04. He wasn't doing this for over 20 years by himself. I mean, these are orchestrated events for this to happen. So I think, as the testimony comes out, we're really going to get more details about the specifics and what actually happened.
I'm so interested to see what we're going to learn as the trial happens. We'll definitely be following it. And I know you will too. Alexis Rosenberg, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Thank you for having me.